someone out here has a statement or an experience they want to share, that would be just fine too.
Yeah.
Speakers, feel free to scoot apart if you need more space there. And if one of you wants to respond to something someone else said, that's fine too. Just think of this more like a conversation rather than a Q&A. Okay?
So if they ask a question, I can say,
Yes, that's my problem. But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming. Does anyone have any prompt to get us started?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For Pastor Brito, more of a practical side of things. And it's kind of, it might be a three-part question. Should a church be practicing new songs on a regular basis? And if so, what should or could that look like?
Okay.
And then, I guess then, so that's the two part. The third part would be then, what would you say to a congregation whose repertoire has not grown in the last several years?
Well, the answer to the latter question is a failure of leadership. That's the primary. And most, as I said, pastoral resumes today are, let's be honest, seminaries have failed in the area of theological, musical preparation. The ministry classes I had with some theology of music was mainly geared towards contemporary sort of expressions, So there's a failure there, but there's also a failure to make that a priority in the life of the church. So if the pastor doesn't make it a priority, the people will not be interested in it. Like I said, churches become like their pastors, and I put that at their feet. The first question concerning what to do, where to practice, the guys here can probably give better situations. But I think music is theological training. Therefore, I would use Sunday school hours to practice, to sing in parts. What Jim did with us at Providence was he would teach music for 30 minutes and then teach on his part 796 series on whatever topic he was focusing on. And so I think that needs to be incorporated to the regular life of the church. We can't just simply say, Sunday morning we worship, and then at some time we get to practice these songs and parts or whatever. I think we need to do that. So we started in our congregation doing music workshops, and we paid this local musician in our congregation who's going through the Shenaniah training at Moscow, Idaho. And we pay him $300 to come and teach our congregation for an hour and a half. And he comes and teaches us the ABCs of music. We recorded, making it available on YouTube. He teaches us, especially the newer, we've doubled in size last year. So there's about 150 people who have virtually no idea what we do, what we sing. And so we offer that class on Wednesday nights for 2 consecutive Wednesdays. It's a 2-hour class, 90-minute class, 1 week, 90-minute class. It gets their feet, it gets them a taste of what is to come. So it doesn't feel as foreign to them. So if we believe what we're saying here, we need to invest financially in that endeavor. So if you don't have any musicians in your congregation, find somebody locally, invite them over, pay them a lot of money, give him tobacco, and he'll do it.
Is that class an ongoing thing?
We offer it every quarter. We just started doing it we've done 2 sessions of it, so next one will be in conjunction with the new membership class coming in.
I think Jessica's question gets to the purported topic of this year's Psalm Tap. What do church musicians wish church leaders knew? And I think it could be summarized in just that phrase: we need your support, because we have enough ideas and a bucket to carry them in for improving church music and church congregational singing. They will all fail if the church leaders, the pastors and the elders, don't, and almost any of them would succeed brilliantly if the pastors supported it verbally and showed up.
Showed up.
and showed up.
Yeah, yeah, the elders don't come to the psalm sings.
Yeah. Well, we talk about bringing in new elders and deacons and officer training. Well, music ought to be a part of that training as well. I mean, in our congregation, deacons can be liturgical assistants in our body, which means they can participate in the liturgy as assistants. And so that requires some kind of musical background and history.
Do you actually do some kind of music training in your officer training? Is it actually incorporated into there?
It has become, we're slowly growing into that.
It's been very clear in our congregation, All Saints in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who goes to the psalm sings and who doesn't on Sunday morning. It's just night and day. Some great singing, and they're all the people who go to the psalm sing.
Is that a weekly thing or monthly?
Well, now it's twice a month. We have once a month at our house, and a recent member just started
Can I
one.
add something to that? And I'd be happy to talk to the session. They're all saints about it. I think if you're going to do a psalm sing, we call them psalm roars because that's how Jim indoctrinated us. But if you're going to do that, make it worthwhile. Make it worthwhile for mommies. Make it worthwhile for little Johnny. Offer all the goodies. So what we do is we sing 6 psalms, and then we have heavy hors d'oeuvres for an hour. It's called wine and psalm roll. We have wine, cheese, every imaginable hors d'oeuvre you can think of. Make it worthy for mommy to come and not have to cook that evening. And it'll be an event. So for us, the psalm sings are, for us, the evangelistic tool we have in our community. It's how we've been able to bring people to our congregation, introduce them to psalm singing, and we've gained many members just through that. So make it an event. You can make it a part of the liturgy, the calendar of the church, but have a time where it's an event. So this is just, I don't know why, you can tell me later on. I don't know why, but after they drink wine for about an hour, the singing, the second part's a lot better. And I think that needs to be done as an event so that people are saying, we're going to that because this is going to be great. We're going to not only see our friends, but sing and enjoy good food.
That's a good idea, and we do have, it is an event, but it's 2 hours of singing, and if you get through that, then you can have all the good stuff.
It's the reward for the...
Yuri, how often does your church do the psalm roars?
The psalm roars we do it three times a year. So we just did our 26th last 3 weeks ago. We had 230 people. I mean, it was pretty spectacular. But we use other opportunities to teach music. We don't use that time to teach new music. So if we know we're going to have 30 Southern Baptists present who have been singing Fanny Crosby for the last 30 years, we sing just the classics. We do our Psalm 23s, the King of Love, My Shepherd Is. We want to give them, as the great theologian Nacho Libre would say, a taste of glory. Anyway.
What kind of musical instrumentation do y'all use to support your home singing?
How many?
No, it's your psalm sing. So
Oh, the psalm singing.
How do
Oh,
you
in the
accompany
home.
that?
Well, I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts too, because I'd love to see that. We have mainly a piano right now, but now we've added a trumpet, and the next psalm roll we have a cello and 3 violins. So we're going to make it an even greater, we're going to build on that. It's going to be a mega event. We're going to make all the mega Southern Baptist churches jealous of us.
I think you need some tubular chime.
Well, I know somebody.
Well, this is a case too for educating your children in musical instruments. So we have regular hymn sings, we have piano, my kids play cello, violin, that fills it out some too. We've got to invest not only in the singing, but in training our children in musical instruments with that long-term view.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work, right? A lot of investments. Our kids took strings together in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
A lot of money, a lot of time, but it's worth it.
People despise the social media sort of world. There's a lot of negativity towards it. I love it. I think you all should record your kids singing dinner songs and put them on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Indoctrinate as many people, because that is the freest and most beautiful tool and platform God has given us probably in the last 20 years. And that's what I would do. But
My last question is, do you have any home programs for interpretation of poetry or the study of interpreting poetry?
A number of years ago at the church where I am, we had a monthly meeting where we would discuss a variety of things. Sometimes it was things like that. Sometimes it was works of literature. Sometimes it was musical works, classical music works, whatever. So there were times when we would do that, but not a whole lot. I did do a series of Sunday schools once on hymn poetry that was pretty well received at the time, although as is often the case with any teaching where you're trying to sustain a direction, unless you keep on pushing on that, unless the leadership is self-consciously pushing that forward, eventually people just sort of settle back down to whatever their least common denominator is.
Was your series recorded?
I think that some of it may have been recorded on audio, but I'm not sure if it's still around even.
Would we be interested here in taking up an offering to support him producing it again and
Well,
recording
actually,
it?
I was actually going to ask that question. So we have the big corporate psalm sing that you how do you get people to come to that? You serve them cheese and wine, but someone has to create those versified psalms or write new hymns, and you guys spoke about that. And how could congregations support you in your endeavors to versify psalms and to write new hymns?
Yeah, Donald.
Pay you full time to do it?
It's a great question. It would have been financial, and I think for a lot of people it would be. Right now I'm running a business, so it's more time. Where do I get the time? And financial isn't going to be what it takes to get the time. It's a great question. It couldn't hurt. I know it helps a lot, like is becoming a theme if the church leadership is behind it, supports it, acknowledges it, promotes it. If
Uses it?
uses it. Exactly. Yeah.
That would mean more than even a paycheck in your situation.
Yeah.
I hired Donald to write probably 80% of the psalms that he wrote, and we did it on a hourly plus number of lines per stanza basis. But that was at a point where you had more time than money. And so at this point, where I'm just waiting for him to retire, so I can pay him to do the rest of the Psalter 10 times over.
We tried to set up Patreon crowdfund, but it didn't go anywhere. We tried to share it around the series, but that was good 5 years ago.
Yeah. About 5 years.
I think the mood has changed a bit. I'll give it a shot.
Would a church ever set aside a portion of their budget for composing new hymns? Like as the pastor here.
Well, we have put money aside to get guys like Michael to provide, beautiful. We publish everything in a order of worship. It looks like a little book. We publish everything there. We don't have our own hymnal yet, but I think that should be part of category budget worship, and under it should be new compositions. But it's a hard thing for every Sunday that I have. We don't sing all 150 psalms. And you don't want to be desperate looking for, a rendition of Psalm 62 or something like that last minute.
Mm-hmm.
But we're building. It's a long-term strategy. So we're building. When we started with back in 2008, there were 3 psalms that we sung. Now we have 76. So it's it's my desire to sort of have all 150 before I die.
Well, money is part of it, but leadership support really does do more than money. Christ Church Ithaca, which is a very small congregation, 25 or 30 people, maybe up to 40 by now. They pay me to come up every 2 months to teach them 2 hours of new psalm settings. My style is much influenced by Anabaptists who everything is vocal with the Mennonites, and it's all the parts and it's all robust, and instruments are used, if at all, to help people sing better. And they'll drop out the instruments if they even have them when people are singing sufficiently, which is the reason I quit playing on the last stanza today. Getting back to Christ Church, when they had to stop meeting at the YMCA because of COVID, they were meeting in each other's homes. They said they found themselves with a bit of extra money, and some of that went towards assembling their own psalm book, their preponderant psalmody. They've 400 selections, I think 350 of them are psalms, and as well as getting the pianos in each home where they were meeting tuned and prepped up, and as well as the preparation. And I happen to be the beneficiary for all 3 of those endeavors, but that's just happenstance. It was Mike Jones' priority of making this happen. He plays guitar, which is the instrument that they have at this point, but it's his enthusiasm that makes it all happen.
Can I ask Jenny a question?
Of course.
Mr. Moderator.
This is a colloquial.
One of the things that I'm such a I love Jordan Doolittle. I think he's done such a great work. He's kind of an example in some of these happy movements happening in the CREC and other places. Do you, because there's so much singing that happens, right, in your congregation with so many instruments and all that, do you select certain verses where you just pull all the instruments back and just a cappella your way through it?
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
And there's some hymns that it's, he's like, yeah, we're just not gonna play at all. I mean, they get them started just barely, and the singing takes off and none of us are playing. I mean, we're all singing because we
Yeah.
all have our music. But
Okay.
yeah, so it's not, it can be instrument heavy if it's a feeling he's wanting, but I think this is teaching me that I take a lot for granted, in that he thinks through every single hymn so that it matches. Sometimes you think the pastor gave him his sermon and he picked these songs to match, because pastor will say something and we'll sing it 3 different times in 3 different psalms. It's like, how does he do that?
It does sound like your church is in a little bit of a different position than some of these other congregations, where you're kind of down the road. You have an organ, right?
Yes,
And you have a lot of percussion instruments and strings and
yes.
brass. You
Yes.
have brass too.
We have a trombone and we have a flute.
Okay. So what do you think is the next
It's
step
not-
for?
And it's not brass, so I'm sorry, it's woodwind, but
What do you think is the next step for your congregation? Because I think for some of us, it's like we just have to get people interested in learning
right.
new stuff.
That's a very good question. I'm sure Jordan has a plan. He always has a plan for
Where's the
what it's gonna
camera?
We love you, Jordan.
Yeah, I don't know what his plan is.
Well, I did ask Bill that question.
Okay.
I asked your pastor, because he preached for me while I was gone last week. And he said, just remember, this is a work that's been going on since Burke Shea. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of work done 20, 30 years ago. So it's, it didn't happen overnight. This has been
Right.
building for a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time. A lot of our congregations are just beginning this new sort of world, but they've been at it for a long time. Burke, who studied under Jim in Tyler, Texas in the 1980s, left Tyler, came to Carbondale, and already had this mindset in the
Yeah.
80s. So
Yeah. And Jordan Doolittle was a little bitty kid. So he grew up singing this stuff, and then he made a choice to go into music. Even though, I mean, it's funny, some people in the church said, I see now I'm being recorded, but, you need to go into something that you can actually like make a living doing. And he's like, I really want to do music. And so this is like 3rd generation almost. So it takes time.
Can you tell us how much your budget for musical instruments is, just so I can tell my church so they can?
Yes, so he was asking me, does the church have a budget for musical instruments? Jordan does have that, but I never know what it is. It grows over time. When I was looking for timpani, and I always look Facebook Marketplace, and Reverb is a great place to find used musical instruments. I just couldn't find it. So that budget grew. I don't really know. But when I found it, that I will have to tell you the story eventually, but I was on a date with my husband, and he put me off at a music store to walk around. That shouldn't have happened. I walked around the corner, and there's a 32-inch timpani just sitting there. I'm like, I can't believe this. This is like right here. And I texted Jordan, and he just said, buy it, just like that. And he's like, it's in the budget. You're totally covered. So I don't know. It seems like
need somebody who just says, buy whatever you want. Just a blank check.
That's what I want to tell my.
All right.
Lots of questions.
Melissa.
Any advice for a budding song hymn writer?
Pick a topic that doesn't already have 5,000 hymns on it. Or if you're going to pick a topic or a psalm, make sure that you're going to say something that hasn't already been said. For instance, I've said this before. If you're going to write a metrical psalm, don't use common meter. We don't need any more. Every psalm has at least 6 and usually 10 or 12. Now, granted, they're not all great, but at least look at the ones that are there and make sure that you can do better. That can't be the only answer to that
No,
question.
I think part of this is to that earlier question going around in my head. What would it take to keep me writing? When people ask me for something, I prioritize it. Greg said there's some conference or something coming up. My late pastor, Greg Strawbridge, and said, would you be able to do this psalm? I don't remember what it was now, 92? 96.
Wow.
So I found the time. Put other things off, probably my children. So that really does help. If you know, Jordan has asked me for something and I'm working on told me after Psalm Tap, I'll have some time, make some time. So that does help. If somebody's actually commissioning something, somebody said, we have this need and we have a deadline, that helps. But to the question of somebody's starting out writing, I think find somebody like Aaron that you can send it to. When I started out 15 years ago or whatever, I was sending what I thought was a finished product, and Aaron was sending it back with notes and training me, even though I'd never met him. I was sending it to my brother, and he was sending it to Aaron. And anyway, that feedback, and I had a list of rules. It was very much rule-driven until it became in my blood. So it's just, and don't get offended, and don't think that it's good enough, and don't be afraid to cut out your favorite parts, because they simply don't work in this. Put them somewhere where they'll work in some other setting. Kill your darlings. As they say. Take advice
I
and
think,
be willing to work.
was it in your talk, Yuri, that you mentioned there's these young 18 to 20-year-old hymn writers? Do you think that is a problem? If you mentioned a budding hymn writer, would your advice be grow up? Like, wait until you're 40 and then start writing?
Yeah, I think, I think music is reveals the character of the church. And so I wouldn't ordain an 18-year-old. And I think it's the task of a priest. I would I would give him all the paper he needed to begin writing, and then he could work in conjunction, work with someone else who has the experience, has done the kind of thing. But I wouldn't create that as a precedent at all, unless he was a prodigy, kind of a unique child, which we may create in the CREC. I've seen some pretty brilliant 18-year-olds. I mean, those homeschoolers, they do stuff. I pursued that route, but those are very, very rare cases. Like I said, if you're not at the age you're ordainable, I caution.
But don't wait till then till you start writing.
Exactly.
If it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something,
You better start early.
put your 10,000 hours of mistakes in, so that when you are 35, you write something that's worth keeping.
Yeah. Once again, I think Jordan Doolittle, whose absence looms large at this Psalm Tap, year after year. We love you, Jordan. It provides
he
the
is
model
actually
here.
watching.
I think he is. That's why I'm saying it.
He really has the time.
Again, he provides the model here in extremely talented, we would call him singer-songwriter, except that he's writing hymns, who writes his own lyrics and his own music. In his congregation, Caleb Sutherland, who he has found, Jordan has found someone to tutor Caleb he's I think 24, 23, to tutor him in music writing and in lyric writing, so that by the time he is 35, he'll be the genius that he promises to be. This is Caleb Sutherland.
I think there was another question back there.
Yeah, going kind of still coming back to that same question of how to support, like what you've done, if you do with your writing and stuff. And it seems to me that goes alongside the issue of, here you're talking about supporting what you do, getting acceptance of what you're doing. Obviously the greatest reward is seeing it being used out there. When you do that commission, for example, you don't want it to stop with that one thing. You want to see it grow into being used by other people. And then the other side, you're dealing with congregations, many small congregations that have small resources to train their people in music and maybe even small resources in terms of the skills that are available. And I would say one of the things that's been mentioned here is that the app that, I don't know if Christ Church does it, but the app where the Psalms are in there and they play the different parts and stuff like that. I would say we're not in the day anymore where when you write a psalm and it's set to music where you can just print it up and hope that's going to get its acceptance. You know, we need to make use of those technologies, because if you got a church that doesn't have a pianist that's going to be able to jump right into it, that technology can be leveraged to learn learn a new song. You know, I'm just saying, you might get into the smaller congregations and have it flow out from there much quicker with more technological support, you know, to a new song. So, something like
Well said.
Do you know of any artificial intelligences that can harmonize?
As a matter of fact, I had a friend,
I'm not entirely joking.
the technologically advanced gentleman from the Christ Church Ithaca congregation demonstrate to me taking a picture of the hymn on the page, and then it played all the parts. It didn't sing them, but it played them all individually. You can turn the volume of each one down and up, which, I don't know, poor Mike Hewitt has just invested all this time in creating it from the Contus files. This AI app does it as you sit and wait. Again, it doesn't sing it.
But it will.
Yes. Oh, it will. Yes. Great. You asked the question about budding hymn writer. Is that a theoretical question, or you have someone in mind?
Yes. You'd probably kill me if I said it out loud.
Okay. What age?
22.
Yeah, I mean, there's opportunities to be tutored under
Yeah,
different
exactly. Right.
from godly
Like
men.
you was-
Lyrics or music or both?
Both, well, no, it's just, it's a through composition.
Okay. So
Psalm
music.
1 and 2, those are the two that I don't remember if he's finished with Psalm 2, but
Okay.
he sent them to Jared. And,
I would love to sing him. It's my thing. I would love to see him. Yeah, I'm a collector.
He'd love advice, I'm sure.
Okay. See me after.
One thing I was going to point out, just kind of a follow-up, you were asking about budget for instruments and things like that. One of the things that we discovered is meeting musicians at other churches or members of other churches and finding out they have instruments that are sitting in closets collecting dust. Our organ, for example, we just got a set of handbells, same thing, collecting dust.
Scavenge off the dying churches.
Yeah.
So that and, like you said,
Yeah.
basic marketplace, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of churches that are moving away from traditional instruments, even percussion and things like that, going praise band entirely. And, there's a lot to be found with just, asking. So that's something we've observed.
I would ask a question if the group doesn't mind, a slightly changed direction. And I've wondered this about anybody who's very well experienced in their field. Does the added understanding and penetration into your subject make it easier to appreciate or harder to appreciate what you're forced to sing or what you're asked to sing? I would, I guess, start with Aaron. Some of what's really good out there, you love it and you can enjoy it and it hits back and it's a very good experience. But the stuff that isn't, what's your experience with that? Is it, in other words, is it really better to be more educated?
Well, yes, I think it is. And I think that it does confront a person with the challenge of responding well when something is particularly obtuse, and when you feel like you're singing in a congregation of people who aren't noticing that at all. Because it's for a number of reasons. One is because we're all unduly proud, and so we have to guard our hearts in that way. But also just because it's challenging to be bringing something in worship. I mean, we all take worship seriously and want to be bringing our very best. And if you're wrestling with the sense of this is so far out of line with what we ought to be bringing, I think that's challenging to know how to navigate that. But I think that not having to deal with that, not having to wrestle with that at the price of not understanding what I'm doing, and at the price of not being able to be moving in a more mature and informed direction, that would be a price too high to pay.
Are you asking, Michael, is it like the greater your musical understanding, the harder it is for you to sing bad music? When your pastor
Yes.
says, we're singing this today,
Right.
and you go, oh, well, okay, I guess that's all.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a challenge for someone who knows a scripture passage real well and hears it exposited poorly, to get something out of it and surrender to God all of the critical thoughts that come to mind during the sermon, which we have to do all the time. That's just sanctification. But having been on the receiving end of that sort of criticism, like you're just being too critical because you're too educated, and then finding myself in that, having that same attitude towards, well, I won't name them, some people who I think are too educated and therefore too critical, and are criticizing things that are really good because they're not good enough. I think, well, I'm sort of rebuking myself by saying that, and yet I wonder, is there a balance to be had there? Is it possible to be too picky because you to dismiss things that you shouldn't dismiss?
Well, I think it goes to what Aaron was saying. It's not education's fault. You don't diminish the importance and value of understanding, whether it be poetry or music, but then you combine that with a healthy dose of pastoral heart and the sort of incrementalism that Yuri was talking about. So it's not excellence and perfection for its own sake. This is for the discipleship and formation of souls and the glory of God. And so if you combine a deep and profound understanding of the craft with that pastoral heart, that might be the balance that we're after.
Right, and there's a distinction between being picky and being discerning.
Yeah.
We should be discerning. We ought to be discerning. I think that God's word calls us to be discerning. If you were an Israelite bringing a lamb for sacrifice, you had to discern, is this a worthy sacrifice or not from the resources that you had. But picky is an attitude of the heart that probably, if we're experiencing it, we ought to challenge it. But I think it's possible to be discerning without being negatively critical or judgmental, but also be able to say, well, we really could and probably should be doing something better. And what are the strategies by which I can use whatever influence I have to try to move things in that direction?
I think this is a question for Yuri, but what's the best way for an educated layperson to suggest something to the pastor of the session? Like, I don't think we should be singing this, but rather than say it that bluntly, is there what would be the best way for you to get that kind of feedback?
Well, they must know me. They must know who I am. They must know the pastoral proclivities and trajectories that we're going as a church. We had a family that visited our church many years ago, and they said, well, unless you add this sort of style or whatever to the congregation. I said, well, I'll see you at bye-bye. This is obviously not your congregation, so he must have some level of, so if he doesn't, and I have to say something like, for example, here's an example here. I was having a conversation with a pastor whose teenagers approached him after church and said, we would like to use our gifts on Sunday morning. And he said, what do I think? I said, well, that question would be absolutely absurd in our context. I would laugh at all these children. It wouldn't make sense because our congregation has a musical trajectory. And so if they know a little bit of who we are, I would have to explain that to them. I said, you don't understand who we are. We do that in our inquirers class. We give them a field we have several P's that we use for our distinctives. Psalm singing is one of them, where we lay out our vision for music in the congregation. And so they have to buy that first. And so I would say, thank you, send me a PDF of it. These days, everybody's kind of in love with Greg Wilbur. He's on Spotify. A lot of moms are loving to use his material when they're traveling. And so there's a lot of Greg stuff that I love. But other stuff is just not fitting for who we are as a body. It's not fitting for corporate worship. They're fitting for solos and things like that. So I have no problems with them recommending, suggesting things. But then it gives me an opportunity to instruct them further. This song doesn't make sense in our context. Here's 7 reasons why. So you're training in every situation, every pastoral encounter is another chance that God gives you to train your people
Right.
to where you're going as a congregation.
Seems to me the answer to that also would have to depend, would be similar rather to challenging anybody for anything in any context. And that is find out what their goals are, and if you can agree with their goals, show how they can accomplish them better.
Yeah. And this leads me to another point.
Of course it does.
It's the observation that pastors have to be very weary of lengthy emails from congregants. I always say the congregant that sends you the most emails are the ones you should be most concerned about. They want to give you healthy paper trails, and they also want to ruin your Monday mornings. And so I usually say, we need to stop that. We'll meet for breakfast, and we can talk about it. Then you don't send me an email for the next 7 months. But they're trying to consume a lot of your time, and they are not thinking pastorally of how this functions. And so just be aware of these kinds of things, and be very aware that pastors function in a different timeline than parishioners do. They have several ongoing concerns, but a lot of individuals, and it's a part of training, a lot of individuals just think pastors are available for all their concerns. And so you have to train them. So thank you for your suggestion. But as I told you in the email previously, in our breakfast previously, no more. Thank you. So it's another opportunity to train and give people a sense of moderation in their requests.
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we get around that by asking them for a confession.
By what again?
Confession, if they want private time with you, cleanse them. And that really levels out the plate. Empty the evil. And
Yeah, there you go.
You can speak to that, Scott.
What's that?
Couldn't you speak to that question?
With suggestions from
Yeah.
people, yeah. No, I agree with everything Yuri said, and we have to understand, and Yuri mentioned this. A lot of the people in our congregations have been trained for so many years to think of music as this is just my preference and my authentic expression. So why wouldn't they want to suggest? Well, this is natural to me. This is authentic. So you have to understand where they're coming from. But then it's a wonderful opportunity to reshape their understanding. And what I like to try to communicate is, would you ever go to your pastor and say that concerning a sermon or a theological idea? Now, some do, right? But I think most people recognize, no, we understand our pastor has an authority over that area, and he is communicating the Word of God to us for our good. We expect our toes to be stepped on. Sometimes the sermon will be comforting, sometimes it will be challenging and convicting. They don't expect that from the songs, though, because of the way that the trajectory has gone for the last 50, 60 years. So we have to reshape their expectations. And in the church that I was an elder in, we've just moved, so we're transitioning, but we would do something similar with a new members class, where I would take 2 weeks and just walk through our theology of worship and our practice of worship. And I would always make a point to tell these new people considering membership, I just want you to know, because I knew their expectations were different, I don't choose hymns because they're my favorites, because we've taken a poll of the congregation, because, for any of those reasons. We choose the hymns in our church for the same reason that we exposit scripture and that we communicate truth throughout the service. It's for the good of our souls. And so just like we expect the sermon sometimes to be challenging and convicting and step on our toes and make us feel uncomfortable, we ought to expect that from the songs. And if you can get people to think that from the beginning, it's helping to reshape how they've been shaped in modern evangelicalism for so many years, which, again, is the pastoral approach. Rather than just shutting them down, understand why they're saying that, reshape their presuppositions.
Okay, we get the point, Melissa.
I threw this out as kind of a joke at lunch, but how bad are things in the church music world? Should we go all the way back and just say, from now for the next 25 years, we're only going to sing psalms until we get those down, and then you guys can have the hymns back. But from now on, it's just exclusive psalmody for the next generation. Our 40 years in the wilderness until
we're cleansed.
Our sins are confessed.
Then you can sing your Fanny Crosby after the palate cleanser.
Slightly
Is
overstated.
that too insane?
Well, I think that the idea is, in general, again, slightly overstated, is exactly what we are doing. Jim Jordan argues for preponderant psalmody. I don't know that anyone in the CRAC holds to exclusive. I don't know any, well,
No.
no, exclusive psalmody. It's preponderant psalmody because the Psalms are reshaping. Now, there's, how bad are things, are you asking, it makes a difference whether you're asking how bad are things for people over 25 or people, 25 and younger, because the people over 25, unless they happen to be in this room right now, are hopeless. They're gone. But the next generation doesn't. They don't know what they're supposed to like and enjoy, and they can enjoy a Genevan or a Schutz or a Welsh or a Scottish or an American folk hymn, or I could go on. Every bit as much as what they would get at an evangelical church.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think things have gotten so bad that the younger generations are actually ready for something more substantive. It's
That's what I found.
yeah, it's it's the 45, 50 plus that are sort of set in their ways. If I see resistance, it's from them. It's not from the young people.
Yeah.
The young people get it.
Yeah, because
They're tired of being entertained. They're tired of the fluff. They want substance, and it's all weird, and they like the weird. I never heard this before. Give me more. So I think there's a lot of promise actually.
So I know in our church, as we have developed this, we have always sung the Psalms. Is that true? From the very beginning, Psalms have been important, but at the time we didn't have this kind of collection. But what Jordan has been doing while he's been here, so we're talking about Jordan again, was he has these song request times. Sometimes it's on a Wednesday night, and he's like, let them choose those songs, and they sing them. And then slowly, they just have gotten weeded out. Not because he said, no, we're not singing that, but they sing that right next to an incredible song. Everybody wants this,
The
and not
contrast is
so much
obvious.
that. And of course, now we've got a whole lot of little bitty kids, and their favorites are 109, the whole thing, 4 pages. And I don't know, has done it without telling them we're not doing it.
Yeah, is it ever appropriate for a corporate clapping of hands, like Psalm 47, all peoples clap your hands? Have you ever seen that or experienced that?
Joseph can speak to that.
Yeah.
We do a single clap. On Psalm 47 when it says clap.
Yeah,
On that Peter Sham tune, I think.
yeah, we do the
And we
same.
do a shout too. We
Where?
have for 30 years.
It's there in the folders. Where would you do it? Where in the song, Beginning of every stanza, or
No.
Just when it says clap, that's the very first verse.
Do you jump when it says dance?
That would be too far.
All the little kids do, though.
Oh, baby.
All of our little kids do. They're jumping up and down. They're waiting for their clap, And my 94-year-old mother, she is watching them, and she gets her hands ready, and she's clapping, so.
But but it has to be corporate, right? It's got to be
That's right.
done well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't want the individualized pie, as I mentioned, to
Right.
infiltrate. Because I think Scott has written a lot about this, where you have this sense of you have wait for your experience to flesh itself out in the corporate dimension. And
It's
you
the
cut
same
off-
with lifting of hands. If it's
Same.
corporate, it's wonderful. If it's
Yeah.
an individualistic sort of emotional thing,
Yeah.
it's different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I've only seen that one time, and I thought it was very effective. It was not in our circles, it was in a hyper-Pentecostal circles. They had no instruments. They wanted to sing the song, so the leader just said, everybody, said they sang the whole song to an accompaniment of their own, keeping time with the clap. The whole congregation did it. Never seen it before or since. I don't know why it wouldn't work.
We have a strange RCC tradition where we sing Psalm 117 out of the Genevan Psalter. It's the shortest one. We'll sing it once, and then we'll sing it again like twice as fast with clapping too, which is not really worship, but for informal occasions.
When you say clapping too, you mean in rhythm,
Yeah.
not just random applause.
You start leaving out words and replacing them. Bingo.
Fill in the blanks.
It's quite fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Michael, I think we have some time to sing.
Great.